Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar sponsored by GovInvest. The webinar title is 2021 Priorities for Local Government Finance Officers, or Revenue Pressures Mount and Choices Get Harder. Let's get started. My name is Charlie Francis, and for those of you who don't know me, I am a retired city finance director following a 45-year career in government finance. Just saying I worked for 45 years doesn't really mean anything unless you know a little bit more of what I did during those 45 years. And I'd like to kind of label myself as an early adopter of technology. In fact, I was one of GovInvest's very early beta customers for the pension module. And that pension module actually inspired me to stress test my pension, develop a long-term strategic plan, and then I became the nation's first implementer of a pension Section 115 trust fund. So now that I've retired, I am a senior consultant with GovInvest, and I'm helping them bring innovative solutions to you, our customers. And I think we have some exciting topics today. Let's start with some housekeeping, though. So our next webinar will be March 17th. It'll be at 11 a.m. Pacific time. And the topic for the next webinar is I'm really excited about this one because we're going to be talking again this year about financial forecasting versus financial modeling. But why I'm really excited about this is we're going to give you an overview of GovInvest's new long-term financial forecasting module. You know, so far, GovInvest started with a pension module that accurately let you forecast the second largest component of your labor costs, right? And that's your pension costs following the actual wages and salaries. And then they went into a labor costing module, first for negotiations, and now for costing out the labor costs for your whole budget. And since we're able now to calculate and accurately and precisely forecast your 75% of your costs in your annual budget, we thought, gee, let's move on to forecasting revenues and forecasting the rest of the expenditures. So we're excited to announce that we have a new module and we're going to be talking about it at our next webinar on March 17th. We will send out a recording of this presentation today, and a copy of the slide deck will be available as well. But here's what I'd like, and I see I already have someone in chat. Inquiring, just say, please participate in this webinar today. Ask us questions. Use the Q&A function that's at the bottom of your screen. And of course, we're going to save room at the end as well. So feel comfortable that we will do that. And then after the webinar is over, you can always reach out to Max at govinvest.com and we'll get any answers that you might have or any follow-up you might require at that point. So what are we seeing in store for 2021? And so first, unfortunately, we will still be focused on the fiscal stress resulting from COVID-19 economic impacts. But then we're going to start talking about digitizing government, how digital transformation will be at the heart of just not getting us through this recession, this economic crisis, but also it'll be providing us the tools to deliver services to citizens more effectively, more efficiently, and more strategically. And that'll result in better government. And that's what it's all about, right? Government of the people, by the people, and for the people. I'm going to try to tie that theme in as we go through the webinar today. Now, an outcome from digitized government will be the need for continuous forecasting or rolling budgeting. I see this as the next generation beyond our legally required and traditional budget development. Finally, social equity is going to be a major focus for our elected officials, and finance officials can help lead that effort through an in-depth procurement reform. We're going to touch on that subject, and it might be the basis for a more expanded webinar in the future. So ready to get started? Are there any questions yet? We did have, I don't know whom to contact regarding the CPE of the webinar. Max, would you type that answer into the chat so that everyone knows how to get the CPE status? Thank you for that
Will
question.
do.
Thank you, Max. Okay, let's just remember, please just ask as we go along, but let's get started. So the nation's, it's going to continue its recovery from this deep coronavirus driven trough. You know, local governments are going to continue to face challenges, and you're probably all facing that right now as you're entering the budget development season for next year. We have to manage our weakened tax revenues, and there's still pressure to maintain or increase public service spending. And this slow economic and job recovery growth, even though a lot of us are moving from the purple into the red zone now, it's slow. It's going to continue to be a drag on personal income, consumer spending, and tax revenue performance. And for those of us in California that are based on tourist economies, travel and leisure spending will likely fully not recover in 2021. So that's going to reduce our resources. Many governments will be unable to close the COVID-created budget gaps that are created using just structural measures. I expect some more one-time uses to balance your budgets. More cuts, harder choices, requiring us to do more with less. I mean, I've heard that my whole career, right? It's impossible to do more with less, but we're going to be faced with how do we manage our budgets? How do we manage our time? And this slower recovery, slower revenue recovery for our cities, more cuts, delayed capital projects, growing deferred maintenance. It's pretty gloomy. It's probably why I'm looking a little scruffy these days. I don't see an immediate recovery. So proactive management remains crucial and critical. Local governments that started out with a cushion they're better insulated from the revenue shortfalls, but they have to continue to manage well. And, critical to success, I think, is going to be some kind of switching from the recovery mode from pandemic management is going to be difficult. In other words, there's still a lot of uncertainty. Now, I know you didn't want to hear a lot of doom and gloom, so let me give you a bright spot. A sizable additional federal stimulus program will benefit us. And last Saturday, over the weekend, the Democrats from the U.S. House of Representatives, they released the full text of the $1.9 trillion COVID relief bill. And within that bill, there was $350 billion set aside for state and local government. $130 billion, $200 million is set aside for the local government fiscal recovery. And it's a fiscal recovery fund. It's there to mitigate the fiscal effects on local government. So the appropriation as proposed is going to be distributing 50% to cities and 50% to counties. And of the 50% that's being distributed to cities, 45 million, almost 46 million are going to what's called metro cities. The definition is a little loose, but basically it's the cities that are over 50,000 in population and included within a metropolitan statistical area, MSA. So 19.5 million are going to non-entitlement cities. And the definition for a non-entitlement city is basically the CDBG formula. Cities under 50,000, not in a major metropolitan statistical area, as the kind of very high level definition of it. Less than 50, not in a MSA. And then of course, 65 million directly to counties. Now, this dollar amount is really rather huge. These are still very rough estimates. I did a lot of calculating over the weekend. I just started to calibrate my calculations with a House committee report. And it looks like of that 130 billion, California will get almost 15 billion of that money, over 10%. And it'll be split between cities and counties because of the bizarreness of the Florida on how much is allocated to cities. $7.7 billion, $1 trillion. I got $1 billion goes to cities, 7.7 billion to counties. And you can see there that $5 billion is allocated to MSA cities or metropolitan cities. And that is going to average, I mean, it's going to be from a low of 2.7 million to 870 million. And the average will be $30 million for municipalities. So if you represent an agency that's in the metropolitan statistical area like San Francisco, Los Angeles, you can, and you're anywhere between 50,000 and a couple million in population, well, you can expect an average of $30 million. Now, GovInvest will have a list of those cities and those rough approximations, and we'll keep you informed of what those are. You can reach out to us after the webinar, and we'll try to get you the specific details for your entity. Now, these are estimates. This is the bill as it currently stands. It still has to go through the approval process. They don't expect approval till March. I think they don't expect distribution till the summer, but it's a ray of hope for us, isn't it? And if you're a non-entitlement city, if you're in a rural area, you're not in an MSA, you're less than 50,000, very roughly, I'm calculating you anywhere from 27,000 down to like Vernon, who's got maybe 5 residents, and up to 12.3 million if you're a city with 50,000 in population, maybe in the Central Valley, but an average of 4.5 million infusion into your general fund. And if you're a county, you can expect anywhere from 221,000 to 2 billion, smallest county all the way up to LA, and an average of 133 million. So I hope that brings a little bit of a smile to your face. We do have software up there that'll help us allocate that, and we'll be making it available for our revenues. Now, what are the uses? Pretty broad category right now. We can use this money to respond to or mitigate the public health emergency or its negative economic impacts. We can cover costs incurred as a result of such an emergency. We can use it to replace revenue that was lost, delayed, or decreased. And we can address the negative economic impacts of such an emergency. Just about anything, I believe, fits into those definitions. But well, as we receive the money and we spend the money, we always want to make sure we create a nexus from the definition to how we're using the money. I'm going to pause and see if anybody has any questions or maybe any updates. We did get one from Justin. Justin is asking, is there any mention of special districts in the bill? I did not find a mention of a special district. It doesn't mean there isn't one, but I didn't find one. But I am continuing my research, and GovInvest will continue to update their customers if we find additional information. Thank you for that question. Okay, digitizing government. I see this as a major initiative for 2021. And before we talk about digitizing government, there's a lot of terms out there. And I'd like to walk through it. The first term, and they're all kind of interrelated. The first term at the bottom of this little triangle is digitization. And digitization is nothing more than the process of converting information into a digital, in other words, a computer readable format. Now, I don't think there's too many of us out there, but there may be still governments that have maybe paper time cards or have paper purchase orders that's being shunt around the office. Data, we need to digitize that data so that we can use it for analysis and analytics. And some people are still in that process. Others of us are at the top of the pyramid. We have begun what's called the digital transformation. It's a citywide or countywide, district-wide, school-wide process, mindset of going digital. So it's like it's ahead of the silos, where this silo says I'm going to digitize and the other one isn't. It's the whole process of using information on a citywide basis to focus on faster, more efficient, and more pointed digital growth. And where do we focus that? We focus it all on the middle tier, which is called digitalization. And that's focusing on the core capabilities and the organizational enablers of our government. So core capabilities include processes and services, decisions and data sharing. And organization enablers include strategy, governance, leadership, and technology. Let's kind of look at those for a little bit. You're probably on this journey right now, and we all have to start. So wherever you are, it's going to be a priority for you this year. Why? Well, you can provide services that meet the evolving expectations of your citizens and the businesses in your community. Even in a period of tight budgets and increasingly complex challenges, you're going to need to make this a priority. It requires attention to the digitalization. That middle part of that pyramid is going to require attention to those main considerations. The first column being your core capabilities, and the second column being your organizational enablers. So what are those? So let's talk about services. Services up here is using digital tools to improve your interaction with customers, with citizens, and with businesses. And usually begin by digitizing your high volume activities, right? People being able to come online and pay their bills online. Okay. The key to good digital services is understanding the user's perspective, and you have to be willing to kind of remake the products. You have to remake the processes and policies around what citizens want. No more hanging on to legacy ways of doing businesses. We need to provide services on mobile platforms and align with the citizens' digital expectations and their preferences and their behaviors. So processes too, is behind the scenes processes offer the most potential productivity gains. There are robotic processing automation tools that would take your invoices and code them to where and move them through your accounts payable process. There are bank reconciliation RPAs out there as well. Software that tasks that used to take hours to do can be done in minutes now. And we can do that, so we're spending more time analyzing information. In other words, moving to good decisions. Now that our processes are automated, we can benefit from financial analysis and data analytics. I'm really seeing that transformation of talent in our organization. I'm going to talk about that over here, but oops, sorry about that. Great. So, I have a Teams call coming in. I apologize for that. I hope you're not hearing that in the background. So, and then that brings us to data sharing. Transparency can strengthen the public's trust in government and its civic engagement. Now, I know many people have been disappointed with transparency initiatives. I was one of the first to go online with a portal back in 2012. I put all my data up there and was very excited about it. And 2 weeks later, my mother wasn't even coming to the transparency portal. What I found is I had to work my transparency portal and encourage and actually sometimes drag and bring people into the portal to look at it. And it was tremendously successful, worth a whole nother webinar. So now that we've got our capabilities, let's look at our enablers. This is going to give us the ability to improve our strategies. We can align our goals through digital transformation with our overall priorities, and then regularly report on that. And I'm going to come back to that in the next topic when I'm talking about rolling forecasting and strategic planning. It'll give us better governance and organization. Why does that keep happening? Okay. And finally, the leadership and talent. We have good talent in our organizations. They're hungry to want to do more, and we can help transform them by training them on financial analysis and data analytics, helping them come up to speed using tools like Power BI or Tableau to pull data from our systems and then spend more time analyzing it. So it requires a cultural change as well. And that finally brings us down to, the technology part, that this is not a major IT initiative. It's a major digitalization culture set. So we can even make incremental adjustments in one department. I had a person ask me yesterday on another webinar, well, what does it take in an organization where I'm the lone wolf? I'm the voice that's crying out for this. And you know, what it takes then is for the lone wolf to start action in their little silo, in their little corner. And by taking that action and having others see the benefits that you're deriving from that, will encourage more people in the organization to come into the digital transformation process. You need to be an evangelist in your organization, driving that change. Well, let's see what's on the next slide. So 5 questions you might want to ask yourself and map the answers onto the framework and enablers proposed in the previous slide. So if we were redesigning the government and there's no legacy structures or systems, what would it look like? And what would its top priorities be? And then what are the biggest differences between that vision and the government today? You know, when we walk through these questions, they're no different than business process improvement questions that we've all seen in the past, right? What capabilities then do we have to fill the gap? What do we have to learn to fill that gap? And then how does our digital transformation efforts compare with the changes that we identified in the 3rd question there? And finally, what new priorities must we set to move forward? Now, I'm not saying any of this is easy. It's going to be very challenging. But many governments have discovered it ultimately rewarding, especially those governments that began the digital transformation process before COVID hit, were more prepared for remote work than any of their counterparts because of the kind of digitalization tools they brought along. So you're on this webinar today, I'm sure, because you've already begun that journey as well. And you're looking for more tools from GovInvest, more tools from the GovTech sector to make your life easier, more productive, more efficient, effective, and more strategic. And so thank you for being here. You know, we need to commit to a comprehensive vision of a digital government. That's the first step. And then leaders need to develop and carry out plans for digitizing the government's capabilities and establishing the right organizational enablers. And governments that do this, you can ease budgetary strain and improve your citizens' quality of life. Now, I know this is hard because we have all the other things we're doing. We're doing budgets, we're finishing our audits. You know, there's all the special projects. There's scenario planning that the council is asking us to run. You know, through all of that, I just don't have the time, Charlie. I just don't have the time, Max. Well, that's where we come in, is we can help you use these tools to free up time so that you can spend time on this 2021 priority that I see, digitizing government. Well, any questions on that topic so far? You know, just chat them in and we'll be happy to make this more of a discussion rather than just listening to me. And as they come in, I'm going to move to the next slide. I love this slide. You've all seen it before, those of you that have been on some of my previous webinars. And it's the heart of what we do, isn't it? We engage with the community and we distill their priorities, their needs and expectations. We call those things visions, missions, goals, and objectives. You know, and then with that, there's a concomitant 5-year, 10-year, a long-term financial plan, right? And we say, wow, this is a terrific output. We usually take that first year of that long-term plan and it becomes our annual budget. Frequently, and more often, we're making the linkages in our annual budget document back to the goals and objectives and the strategic plan so that our citizens, taxpayers can see that we are really truly effectuating what we said in our strategic plan. But the cycle needs to be continuous. It stops often in the budget execution phase, you know, where we don't recalibrate the 5-year financial plan with actual results as we move through the year. So when I was a finance director in Sausalito, I used to recalibrate this long-term 5-year financial plan at every policy decision the city council was considering, because that had an impact on the finance. My motto always was, sooner or later, it always comes down to money. Now, you need to know what the fiscal impact is on your long-term strategic plan and the community's needs and expectations. Not that I want you to change your decision, but I want you to be informed on what your decision is. Now, you can imagine how time consuming this was for me and how arduous it was, because all I had was Excel to do it. I'm an advanced Excel user. I used to have all these linkages, and I lived in constant fear that they would break. I was like a slave beholding to my worksheets and my spreadsheets and living in constant fear of them. Today's technology allows us to break free from that and just automate this process of the extrapolating where we are in our current year budget to actual to our end of the year, which becomes our new base year. The new base year then recalibrates the 5-year plan, and we look for these alignment zones so that we can see, are we on track or are we not on track? I see we have a question come in, a couple questions. So first from Carla. Carla, thank you. Once an agency commits to digitization, how long does it typically take to see significant progress? Certainly keeping in mind that it's continuous and addictive as you see more and more capabilities. You know, absolutely. You see results almost immediately. The minute you learn Power BI or a tool like Tableau, you're going to see instant results. And then it's going to open your eyes to say, wow, I could have been doing that all along since 2012 when Power Query first came out. And then that's going to generate more thoughts to say, oh, now I can do it this way. Now I can do it that way. Yes, it takes upfront effort to learn these tools. And yes, it is addictive. But the addictiveness of it creates more and more productivity, which frees up more and more time for you to learn more, do more, and spend more. And I guarantee you, when you start sharing these results, because the purpose is not to hoard information, but it's to use the information for good decision making, your peers are going to say, we want to be able to do that as well. And Kristen suggests way to address the concerns from the elected officials who may feel utilizing the digital methods and opportunities for service delivery takes away from that small town feeling. Well, so small town feeling. Sausalito it's like a suburb of San Francisco, but definitely has that small town feeling. You know, it wasn't so much that it's a focus on digitalization and you know, looking at the organization that as being a high-tech organization. Certainly that would take it away. The high-tech is kind of hidden behind the information that goes into feeding decisions. So the elected officials, you know, are sitting there saying, asking questions, and then they're getting the answers that they need so that they can respond to the citizens effectively. Now, I actually experienced exactly what you're asking. So I used to have elected officials say, you know, Charlie, the reason we have to make the political decision is because we don't have the information that we need to make the rational decision. So I started putting together performance indicators, program performance budgets. So I'd put together some data analytics and start feeding them this information. You know, and a couple of years later, one of those elected officials came to me and said, Charlie, this is all great. You know, it's really helpful. We can't stop doing it this way. But you know what? I really liked making the political decision. And so, you know, because it kind of took away from their ability to make irrational choices. So great question. Thank you, Kristen. Okay, back to the presentation. I need to close that chat box. All right, so yeah, Fiscal stress has forced us to pay increasing attention to our revenue trends. It's increased the importance of financial forecasting. So systematic revenue forecasting and long-range plannings, they're necessities now. They're no longer luxuries. And we have to get rid of our risk aversion to technical or what do you call it? Not the kind of forecasting that's statistical rather than, anecdotal, or here's what I think. And the implementation of systematic revenue forecasting, it doesn't really require a battery of rocket scientists. It just requires tools. And I think it's going to be particularly true because, especially for our tourist economy cities, that we can't rely on relatively stable we can rely on relatively stable property taxes, but we have a lot of less unstable sources out there. And so revenue forecasting is going to be more and more important and should improve increasingly fruitful for us. Okay, so this is kind of something that I talked about earlier, is that our budgeting approaches from tradition to more advanced provide varying benefits and challenges. This is a very busy chart. It'll be available for you later to read what the benefits and challenges are, the movement from traditional to advanced. And many of us are in here in the journey, but we've probably also discovered this year the necessity for continuous forecasting. In other words, every month we didn't know what was happening with COVID. A new situation was emergency. We're going to go back to being able to go out to restaurants. And then a month and a half later, we're shutting all the restaurants down again. Always responding, always adjusting, requires the need for continuous forecasting. It's forward looking. It's not limited to a fiscal year anymore. We have regular touch points as we're going through the process. It has to be flexible. Gives us key business drivers, will give us the benefits, and it's transformational. It's not tied to incentives. So that's going to be some of the challenges that we face. And we want to bring intelligence into this, so we have all of this data out there. Just what I talk about when I'm talking about digitization. Let's get the data digitized. Get our hands on data sets. There are multiple ways. Most likely, sometimes you can buy the data, you can collect the data, you can generate the data. And then once you get it, you need to store it, clean it, curate it. Just think of your vendor system. You might have, you want to tie, how much are we spending on a certain vendor? And in your vendor system, if you don't have them coded by numbers, you might have Acme Inc., and Acme with capital letters. And when you bring that into a digital system, they read them as 3 different companies. And so we need to clean that data so we know that when we're looking at Acme, we're looking at one organization. We have to think through sometimes our digitization effort, curate that, featureize it, and then it's consumable. And once it's consumable, it can go into models and you can gain insight from these models. Please explore them, try them, reach out to us. We know how to use Power BI and Tableau. These models will help you forecast events, predict values, and discover patterns. And at the end of the slide, I'm going to chase a little squirrel there for a minute and talk about geovisual predictive analytics. So then you need to productize your decision-making, bring your models and your machine learning services into production, apply your insights, test your hypotheses, and then develop real-life action plans. Take actions on your gained knowledge. Follow up with your city and where did you gain value? This generates new feedback data, which then continues into bringing intelligence into your forecasting. Now, we all know what predictive analytics is. It's like analytical information that helps us predict the future. And we know what geovisual data is. And I think there's a new field emerging called geovisual predictive analytics, where we merge these two together, take data analytics with spatial information and use that information for determining what government services do people need? Where do they need it? When do they need it? And which people need the government services on a predictive basis? And we're already seeing some of that technology already, like in our policing and in epidemiology. and things like that. I think we're going to see more of that in the future. Embrace those technologies. And as I come to the end of this slide, I see we have another question from Ellen. Ellen7, I'm having a hard time with your comment that we should be excited about receiving federal funding. That enormous amount of money comes from the taxes paid by hardworking Americans. Why should cities be depending upon welfare from the federal government? I think we should be planning for emergency situations like the city I live has done. As a community volunteer, I'm not comfortable with that advice. And I appreciate your concern. I appreciate your comment. And nobody really wants to pay more taxes, but it's coming. And because it's coming, we can start planning for it and how we're going to use it to make our cities respond better. So thank you. That's all good observations. It's going to solve some challenges for us right now, right? So with the technology coming, we'll be able to get out of spreadsheet entrapment. Now, I know there's a tremendous amount of consumer surplus in Excel, but it's a manual update. It's an opportunity for error. It slows our entire budgeting process. You can't really collaborate within the spreadsheet environment. And that creates our stakeholders to be disengaged because it's a tedious and overwhelming task, and there's no strategic value when you're just processing data in a spreadsheet or without continuous feedback. You can get erroneous assumptions. Our initial budgets and our current priorities are misaligned if we're not continuously forecasting. Sometimes this will result in budget surpluses that could have been allocated to other investments because people would be padding their budget if they're not continually forecasting. There's inflexibility to modify plans to see the immediate impacts of business changes, and then overspend surprises, without transparency into relevant categories, without being able to look on it on a day-by-day budget to actual basis. Cost center owners won't be able to investigate and the underlying causes of variance. So we need to give people those insights as they're occurring. And so finally, we need to grow a continuous forecast culture. We have to maximize the alignment between people, process, technology, and the organization to create a culture that drives insights with speed and agility, with forecast accuracy, and a measurable component of performance reviews should be built into your organization to ensure the process is flexible so that the forecasts are easily updated, and your tools and the software you use are going to matter. Tools that can deliver results with accuracy, timeliness, standardization, and visualization are paramount. And isn't that the fundamentals of the GovInvest software? Accurate pension, labor costing, and revenue and expense forecasting on a timely basis as you need it, with standards built in to our industry standards built into our own unique charts of accounts, and visualizations that give us insight. All right, I want to move on to procurement reform. There's this procurement reform could be another webinar in itself as well. The economic crisis caused by COVID-19, it's increased an urgent need for procurement reform. Before the downturn, local governments in the United States collectively spent about $1.6 trillion per year. And now they're facing severe revenue shortfalls. And at the same time, demand for services are rising, and residents and small business owners are struggling to survive. Look at your individual communities. Look at minority-owned small businesses. They're particularly hurting in all of our communities. And according to analysis completed this last summer, the estimated number of actively working Black small business owners fell by 26%, Asian business owners by 21%, and Hispanic business owners by 19%. This crisis has left our communities of color especially vulnerable to the health and the economic shocks. So we need to maybe use our procurement process to help with that. Despite years and years of maybe weeby reform or programs and policies to improve their participation in our government procurement services, not much has changed. And some governments are even spending less on maybe-weebies than ever before. And so local procurement reform offers a powerful opportunity for local governments to spend wisely and deliver the best service possible and spur economic development in underserved communities and address long-standing systemic inequities that have kind of locked out maybe-weebies out of opportunities. So I think we can develop more outcome-driven procurement processes that can help local governments leverage their spending power and bolster the economic well-being and equity of their communities. So again, it's a webinar all on its own. I just want to talk about change is possible. I want to talk at a very high level of some of what we can look at. So here's some insights. Good procurement is equitable procurement. Solutions that advance equity also support other goals like value for money, efficiency, and transparency. So there are myriad reasons for governments to adopt more user-friendly technology and processes, more open data, and outcomes-based contracting. Co-creating overcomes barriers, where we look at procurement reforms and solutions with our frontline workers, with our vendors, with our citizens, and ask everyone to come together to enable solutions that successfully help SMEs and MWBEs overcome the barriers to entry. And we have to recognize that technology is not going to fix everything. Many ideas for improving how procurement can be done involves change management, process improvement, and communication. And finally, there's ecosystem actors. They're included in community organizations like chambers of commerce and philanthropies, different levels of government, as well as businesses, asking them to play a bigger role in supporting a more equitable municipal procurement system. You know, local governments are big buyers, and here are just some 5 game-changing solutions, recommendations that I've read in some reports. One solution could be just to set city goals in terms of the number of contracts awarded to maybe-weebies, SMEs for equitable procurement, and to be accountable for them. So publicly share those goals around inclusive procurement, and working towards those goals can galvanize your city staff. It can draw public attention to the issue and ambition and encourage public accountability. Another game-winning strategy is to build SME and maybe-weebies capacity to bid, win, and deliver contracts, including access to financial services. Help them successfully navigate the whole procurement process and help with access to credit and increase their bonding capacity. Just as a small business, I recently entered into a contract with the city, and they asked for like a $2 million errors and omission insurance, and for me to carry that insurance for 3 years after the contract ends. $2 million E&O. You know how much that cost me? I didn't have, as a small business, especially a business of a minority in color, they might not have that ability to do that. And then, you know, the last recommendation here is paying on time. You can imagine providing a service, submitting an invoice, and getting paid 2 months later. Small businesses just really can't do that. So, you know, these are just 5 procurement reform goals: design and iterate user-friendly systems, help them qualify for bids through more flexible experience requirements, and breaking up big procurements, paying on time, all things to help with procurement reform in your community. Whew. Talked a lot, and we've covered a lot of ground. Now, do you have any other additional questions? You can use the chat box, and be happy to stand by and answer any questions that this might have stimulated for you. Max, I'm not seeing any come in. Again, let me just cover that the webinar is recorded. We'll be able to send out a recording and the slide deck. We will be having another webinar on our financial modeling and long-term financial forecast tool on March 17th. GovInvest is always standing by to help you with your digitization, with your forecasting. And we just want to, oh, I do see a comment coming in from Brad. Hi, Brad. Given what you are aware of, when do you think we might return to 80% of normal? Well, Brad, you know, I'm reading forecasts now where people say that 2022 might see a return to 80% of normal. I'm not sure I understand what the new normal is going to be, or even what the old normal was. You know, when I think about masks, and I wear my mask when I go out, I'm thinking it'll never go away. It's like Homeland Security at airports. Once it starts, it's not going to stop. So I don't know if we're ever going to get back to a normal, but an 80% of normal. I'm reading many projections now where it could be 2022 before we see any kind of return. Carolina says, not every system usually does everything well. Do you still use Excel to integrate with some of those modeling tools? So that's a really good question. I really love this question, Carla. Thank you for asking it. You know, too many times when I hear people say they're considering software, they say, you know what, I want a system that does everything. So I'm not going to buy your point solution today. And the problem with an ERP that does everything is that at the core, they have to do the debit and credit processing, the general ledger module well, and then they have everything else that integrates it. But the main focus of that business is to make sure the general ledger and its core modules, AP, payroll, are functioning so that you can trust the input, trust the output, and know it'll be done on time. Budgeting modules, labor costing modules that don't take into account your pension forecast, they're not doing that as well. So, you know, I'm thinking that we'll always have Excel. It's a powerful tool, and I like using it. And sometimes it's going to be important, but the real key is the initiative of digitization, getting everything in digital format so you can use tools for analysis to make decisions with. And thank you for the nice compliment, Carla. Let's see, Carolina. Kristen, do you have any suggested resources regarding procurement? You know, I do, Kristen, and I'm able to, I don't have it right in front of me right now, but I have a wonderful guidebook on this topic. And in that guidebook, there are many references to other resources. So I'd be happy to send that to you after the webinar. Max, can you make a note that Kristen Stout would like to get that information?
Will do.
Yeah. Thank you for your concern on that. Catherine Hilliard, if not Excel, what other programs, apps should be used for advanced analytics? Glad you asked that. Excel is powerful. I've been an advanced Excel user for years. And I knew about Power Query, Catherine. I never used it. I never realized the potential it had. And I discovered it when I first learned about Power BI. And what it does is it allows you to, you know, you have a data, like an output from an ERP system. I use Springbrook and Sausalito. And I had, you know, it would come out with all these headers with merged cells with a city logo on it. And even though I asked for the output in Excel, it had all this crap in it that you just couldn't do any analytics with, and you had to clean the file. Well, with Power Query, you're able to import that into Power Query, walk through several steps to clean that data up and put it into the format that you want. And then every other time you're getting more information, your next month's budget to actual, Power Query automatically cleans it for you. So I beg you, learn Power Query, learn Power BI, and your life will be changed. It takes a little bit of learning up front, but the productivity gains downstream are huge. Caroline, another question. She goes, early transparency tools were basically data dumps leading to more resources necessary to answer questions from public. What are important features to look for in current transparency tools? Yes, so and you're absolutely right. The early data tool that I had required me to dump data I was doing it monthly, and then uploading it into the system. And then if I had a change in my chart of accounts, then it required me to, like, I added a new account number. Well, you had to go back into the transparency tool and remap it. And that's because the early transparency tools were taking your chart of accounts, which has segments, a fund segment, a department segment, perhaps a division or program segment, and then an object segment. And it would break them up. And then if we had any kind of undiscipline in our chart of accounts, and many of us do, where an object number in our general fund means office supplies, and that same object number in an enterprise fund means professional services, it would break because it didn't know how to handle it. Well, what I'm learning from the tools that I'm developing and that we're deploying through GovInvest right now, like our transparency, analytical, and a forecasting tool. It does all of that in one tool. It transforms that information, and I'm using the whole, just like your ERP uses the whole account code string as a index key to your different segments. So there's no more breaking this up. And because we can ingest the same information and clean it the same way on an ongoing basis, we can actually do a SQL query into your ERP, pull that information, and automate the update of your chart of accounts on an ongoing basis, as well as providing you reconcilable transparency tools. We're reaching close to the end, I think, but I just want to point out again, a transparency tool is great. Oh, we still have time. And I love them. It helped me take back my community from what I call cave people. And you all have them, Citizens Against Virtually Everything. But I had to work it. I had to tell people, come to the site. I used to, every fiscal impact section of every staff report where I was referencing information, I would put the hyperlink to that view in that fiscal impact section, encouraging my citizens to go there and check that information. Now, why was I doing that? I wanted people to trust the information. Now, many of them didn't click through, and probably many of them never will click through. But the point was, I was telling them, oh, what happened? I was telling people, you can trust this information. And I was restoring the biggest deficit there is in government today, and that's the deficit in public trust. So transparency will do that for us. Transparency brings accountability, and with accountability comes public trust. And that's a very huge factor in improving the services we deliver to our citizens. Thank you all so much for all these questions. I just love it. And again, reach out to us through Max. We're happy to help you. We're happy to interact with you. We want to show you our new long-range financial forecast and data analytical tool. If you want a demonstration of that before the next webinar, we're happy to do that too. So, and remember, GovInvest is software that is priced to your organization's needs. And, I think that you're going to find that our data analytical and financial forecasting tool is affordable, as be effective and efficient for you, and you'll really enjoy using it. So let's see, I think I have one last question. Carol, thank you, Carolina. Thank you, great presentation. So all of you have a good day. Rely on us for your professional services, and thank you for being in the webinar. GovInvest, thank you for allowing me to speak to your audience today, and goodbye, everyone.